So quick question, just raise your hands. How many of you guys have ever used Salt Enterprise in the past? All right, we got 2 of you, excellent. And were any of you here for the pre-conference training that went to the Salt Enterprise intro piece? All right, excellent. Fresh meat, perfect. All right, let's kick it off. So really the topics today, we're going to talk about Salt Enterprise features, the different things that are available within the architecture itself, as well as targeting, being able to handle job management, functionally utilizing the system itself, and kind of the comparisons between open and enterprise. We're going to talk about returners and reports, as well as some quick details about our professional services team, as well as our customer support and customer success management organization. So Salt is a web-based UI that essentially overlays on top of Salt Open. It provides you with reporting, auditing, role and scope-based security. It's basically giving you the ability to view your infrastructure in a way that you've never quite been able to see it with Salt Open. It provides redundancy within the solution itself, as well as it's an enterprise data store to be able to manage all of the content that you have within your infrastructure and easily be able to communicate with your infrastructure in ways that you were already obviously able to do so, but this also provides you with a view into it. And of course, provides additional access to support as well as professional services. And effectively, this is the enterprise framework itself. It basically just takes what you already have on the open side and extends it out exponentially. So you have the ability to do things from a multi-master standpoint that while you're able to do it within Salt Open, the enterprise provides that view into things and being able to constrain access to different users for being able to utilize the system itself. Salt is a very powerful tool, and you can cut yourself on it very quickly. And this gives you the access or the ability to kind of constrain or restrict the ability for your users to be able to hurt themselves effectively. It is a remote file server, as well as a command and control interface, a central job return database. So on the open side, there's no database. We don't manage or maintain any of the returns unless you're looking for something specific. And then we basically, as the job comes in or the return data comes in, we just drop that data and don't manage it. Whereas on the enterprise, we want to maintain that information and keep it for being able to view historical information that has happened over time. Of course, again, role and scope-based security, and we have the ability to authenticate against LDAP or an Active Directory backend. And really, there's 2 pieces to it. There's the Salt Master plugin, which is essentially just a configuration item on your master that points to the enterprise API and tells your system to just send return data over to that system, as opposed to just moving it somewhere else, whatever. And that's really where the enterprise console provides that visual interface into those returns. So the good part about this is you don't have to re-architect your entire Salt Open infrastructure in order to be able to consume enterprise. It really is an overlay on top that provides additional features and functionality. And this is a great graphic on that specific instance here. Currently, whenever you're connecting to or utilizing the Salt API, the Salt Master API, you're effectively connecting to one master at a time to be able to run those commands on the minions that are managed by that master. Whereas with the enterprise, it provides really an aggregate API of all of your masters together to be able to run, again, those single commands, but you don't have to figure out which master in order to specify a particular minion. Because with this combined API, you have the ability to utilize all of the features at the top here, including role and scope-based security, so you can ensure that the authenticated system that's connecting to whatever it is that you're running and attempting to run is effectively allowed to do so. Of course, an encrypted pillar, so on and so forth, but effectively the Salt Master plugin really provides these 3 things back to the enterprise framework, and it's just the job details, the files that are available in it, and the pillar data. And then from your masters, you're returning the information of the grain details as well as all of your job return data and any events that happen. And so right now, as we're maturing with the enterprise solution, it's going to give us, over time, really the ability to do things that we haven't quite been able to do in the past. When an event comes in, right now we can look for that specific event and evaluate it and do something with it basically a beacon type of scenario, or essentially turn into an orchestration process that happens based off of an event. This is the whole purpose of event-driven infrastructure, right? Well, this data being able to be shipped back from your masters to this enterprise console will give you the ability to view this information in a much easier manner. Again, it's a web application, provides the front end into the framework itself, as well as the interface into being able to manage those minions. You're able to manage roles and your users and the roles of those users to be able to then even access the entirety of the system itself. Setting up essentially for multi-master failover, you have the ability to do so very easily with a distributed primary and secondary failback. And of course, from a behavioral standpoint, this gives you the ability to mark different commands for all masters in your cluster, if you will, as well as being able to run your salt run details on all of your masters as you need to. From a multi-master active or hot scenario, if you will, basically a behavioral standpoint here as well, being able to mark those commands for the first master to respond in the cluster, and then moving on past that to be able to utilize any of the other, or manage any of the minions that are connected to those systems. It's still going to be able to run those processes that you need to, so job failures will not be evident in this type of scenario.
Hey, wanted to ask a quick question. How many of you are running masters in that kind of an active or a hot environment? Can you give us an idea about how many masters you have running that way? 3 of them total? So all minions reporting to all 3 masters? So several like different like verticals of that same kind of scenario? Okay. So far so good? Perfect. All right. Good to hear.
Other than needing shared cache.
Shared cache?
Shared cache is the biggest challenge with
Okay. So maybe this will, yeah.
Yeah, we can talk about that. So essentially, whenever you have multiple enterprise servers, you can put them behind your load balancers as needed, F5, HA proxy, so on and so forth. And then effectively, you have to manage the ras.key. It needs to be on the same on each server. And then, of course, there's SSL pass-through, or you're able to terminate functionally from the system, utilizing the web sockets within the system itself.
Yeah, we just wanted to go ahead and just pause real quick there and just see, any questions really about kind of the architecture of enterprise? Any, so far, I know Charles has gone through it, and we've, kind of on purpose done this pretty fast, but any questions kind of on the architecture so far? These guys are just here waiting for lunch? Is that kind of the... I would almost say that the enterprise architecture really is going to, I would say it kind of supersedes the Syndic model. For kind of a very wide sort of platform. So if I have wide masters, or you have those kind of, let's say in your case you had like 3 masters, to us within kind of enterprise, we would take those as kind of a clustered, a single instance, minions all reporting to that kind of 3-node single instance master cluster. That is represented then in the enterprise as a single master. And we'll take care of which master is active and kind of lock down the distribution. And so really for kind of a very wide master architecture, that enterprise really would kind of supersede that Syndic model.
Across regions, one of the big reasons I have to do multi-masters, I need to have sets of masters in different geographical regions for one of the reasons.
Right. So communication still, you're still going to have those, hot set of masters in each maybe of those regions, and then communicating into the one kind of central foundation instance. And then I'm still able to aggregate all the data up, into the Postgres database that Charles had talked about, distribute commands, get that, so the communication is there. That really was the design, is to go ahead and kind of just abstract that Syndic model up into kind of a common framework, and just be able to use that. So, we're not going to deprecate the, the Syndic model. Charles and I will definitely go ahead and promote the Enterprise Foundation model, but anyway. Yes, sir.
So if you don't have the Salt installation in place right on the Salt Enterprise, do you set up Salt Open first and then install Enterprise as an overlay?
So the question was, if you don't have a Salt installation at all today, are you able to utilize Enterprise right out of the gate? And do you have to install Salt Open in order to utilize Salt Enterprise? And technically the answer is yes, you do need to install Salt Open because the Enterprise really, again, is just an overlay on top of that provides additional controls into what you're doing. It is on the master side, you're installing a plugin that then utilizes the Enterprise API as an engine, as a Salt engine, right? And then you're also able to return your events. So there's just a really nothing more than a master configuration setting that specifies where you're sending your returns. Just similar to utilizing a returner in whatever aspect that you're doing on the open side today. But then on the enterprise side, it's just simply returning that content there. Yeah. Great question. Any other questions? Excellent. So from a targeting standpoint, currently Salt is obviously it's a remote execution framework that provides you the ability to do just about anything that you need to within your infrastructure. But with remote execution, you need good targeting, and I believe that Salt has one of the most robust targeting mechanisms of any solution that's out there. And utilizing the enterprise framework really kind of adds on to that targeting capability. So you have the ability to do things from a very simple standpoint, being able to call things out utilizing a glob-based configuration, specifying, if you have like regular expression type of targeting, you have the ability to do so inside of enterprise as well. You can also do things based off of all of the grain data that you have. So being able to arbitrarily tag a system with a specific grain information, you're still able to then target those systems utilizing that arbitrary grain data as well. User-defined targets, so on and so forth. Jobs themselves, they're able to use to run the remote execution itself. Within the enterprise framework, you have the view into those jobs themselves and the ability to run them and view the results of those jobs. But the important part really then comes down to being able to view this historically as well. So you can create ad hoc job runs to run just like you do normally, but this also provides you the ability to create tasks and jobs for different users to be able to utilize within the console or the infrastructure itself. Then we have, of course, we want to be able to see the data, right? So we have the returners, our returners and our reports themselves. Whenever you're looking at the console itself, there's a little tab at the bottom where you see this red icon, or the red arrow there. That's the job history view. So regardless of where this job is executed from, we're going to be able to see the historical view of all of the jobs that have ever run on it. And you can drill into this and view this content over time, which is something that we really didn't have and don't have on the open side unless you're forcing that content to go somewhere else. So we're going to run a demo real quick, actually real slow. But we're going to show role-based access control, an example of that targeting, and then of course, job execution, the returners, and the reports themselves. And really anything that you guys have any questions about, feel free to stop us at any time and we will address those as needed.
Is everyone able to see it okay? Is that all right? How many of you ever have to give demos? Raise your hands. You ever have to give demos? Do they always go well?
Most of the time.
All right, so those of you who shook your head like this, then you can say like a little prayer to the demo gods, for us. Charles and I have been doing this a good long while, but you never know, do you? It's kind of fun, isn't it? Keep this up or whatever out. So wanted to go ahead and just kind of give you, if this is your first view kind of into enterprise, and then during the different sessions, like lunches and that, I know Charles or I or one of the other, kind of SEs for Salt will be at the desk, and we can drill in farther, into this and give you maybe some more kind of use case based sort of information. But wanted to go ahead and first just cover, to us, one of the really foundation principles of enterprise was that RBAC system. Being able to easily go ahead and control the who and the what and the why of distribution within Salt. And so all of that's really going to be applied from within just the settings kind of workspace, I think is our official term for these icons on the left. And within that settings workspace, the first thing that we'll do from the top of the list is define our authentication sources And that can either be from kind of a local kind of database-based user, just these local accounts, or I can go ahead and also apply or add additional like auth backends. And so again, very easy to come in, connect. This is kind of an example of my own internal like Active Directory LDAP source, and so very kind of common bind and auth DNs, things like that. I'm also using kind of an external one, just a jump cloud. If you're familiar with that, that's just kind of LDAP as a service. So as I'm traveling, across the country or whatever, I always have kind of a consistent LDAP source that I can utilize. Once I've defined either those groups or those users within LDAP, and we can go ahead and authenticate against either group or users, then I would go ahead and take them, put them into roles within Salt. And that Salt stack, again, that can be, we can define many of these. I'll give you, kind of the heads up and in hopes, I know from Charles and my perspective that you put additional pressure on our product management and our developers to give us the ability to actually take these roles and clone them to new ones. Wouldn't that be a great feature? Raise your hands. Yeah, great feature. All right. So 3 of you think that's a great feature? Okay. Today, though, to build, I can build these roles and then actually mark off specific permissions within the UI for those roles. So you see kind of the standard deletes, reads, run, write sort of operations. And so per role, I can go ahead and then add those permissions on what they get to do within the UI. Also from within this role, I can specify the specific jobs that they get to execute, and we'll give you some context on where these come from or how we can incorporate those into the UI, as well as kind of the different permissions. So if I want to get real granular that a specific user role can only read and run, a specific job because that's all I want them to do within the UI, so be it. And there's some other ways that we can kind of mark these permissions as well as those jobs are created. The other things, we talked a little bit about targets. You see a lot of very OS-centric targets, and we'll get into a little bit more of that in a second, I think, after this RBAC. But again, the ability to come in and give a specific role permissions to a target. So are they able to delete, read, write to those, et cetera, change them? So hopefully pretty easy just to come in, create your own roles. Definitely the design, is laid at some point will give you the ability to easily clone these roles so that if I have something built up like this specific administrator role where I've got, several selections that are already kind of ticked within the list, I can just go ahead and right click, add to a new, I've got a new role created. So that's kind of the RBAC system within Salt. Kind of moving on, the next one really is the targets. Now that I have permission structure built into the UI, next thing is I'd come in and see from kind of an all minion perspective, and I'm logged in kind of as a, I have the master of all, so I can see everything, I can do everything as this kind of super user, the Salty Demo 1. So I get to see all minions and all their, all the jobs that are kind of contained within this list. But if I do need to go ahead and filter these lists down, you do have the ability to come into this filtering mechanism. This is actually this kind of addition. I think Charles had called this out during the earlier section, but there is just a simple filtering where I can come in and based on either a master or all masters that are within my environment, to the gentleman that said, I've got sets of 3 hot masters. Again, those are still going to be like master group A, master group B, or location A, location B, C, even though they're comprised of multiple masters themselves. And so I can go ahead and target either the cluster of masters or those single masters that are feeding it. The other option that we have, or I should say, once we choose those masters based on globs, grains, or lists, then I can go ahead and maybe I want to choose a specific grain. So anything that how many of you using custom grains in your environment? Pretty extensively. So any of those custom grains that are set, all those will roll up into the enterprise. So it's not just the grains that we define, or you don't have to redefine those grains. I use one called like I tag, or I can go ahead and create something like a role or a location, or fill in the blank there. But any of those can be created, and I can just go ahead and specify any of those ones from the list. Again, it'll go ahead and pre-populate those. I can just click through and actually add those. Once I do have those added, let's say for my Debian-based minions, then I'd come in and either save that out, and then from here, if I do choose that specific role, let's say it is the Debian-based, or we'll use Ubuntu for an example, Then I can come in and actually secure those minions, give the specific roles rights to actually interact with those. So this particular, the user role for the Ubuntu, target, I've given them discover and read rights, and that's it. They won't be able to change them. They won't be able to delete the role itself, and that's what I want to do. And so that's a little bit of targeting. The other thing I wanted to call it real quick also is this kind of additional of the advanced targeting. So if you're used to kind of Salt command line and just kind of, complex targeting within Salt, this does kind of give you almost like a free form or free flow targeting, just within this enterprise as well. So you don't have to be constrained just to the simple grains, globs, or lists. We can go ahead and do a little bit more advanced in that free form. So that's targeting. Go ahead, sir.
Is the list, the columns in that table, is that configurable? In like an Amazon EC2 instance situation, the minion ID is all the useless.
Yeah, it's hard.
Like are you able to take other grains or color data from the minions and put it in that table? Because just minion ID there's lots of use cases where that is not helpful when you look at that list.
Yeah, I don't think we can go ahead and point the actual, into that specific table. I don't think there's an ability to import other than, I know that we can do like node groups if those have been configured. I know that there's a runner that exists that we can actually import the node groups in, so they would be available targets within the UI. Great suggestion, something we can add to the list.
Yeah.
So.
You used to see an ID-X-X-X, and that's all your minion IDs. Then you really have to start learning using other things to identify.
Yeah, and I've heard again, and since Charles and I are in sales, we can just tell you all sorts of wild, fantastic stories about what we're going to include in this. But, I've heard at least, pillar, being able to use pillar targets as well. And so some, again, as we continue to move forward, advanced targeting, definitely. So to us, the simple was the first kind of go around, the first two releases. We've advanced or at least introduced the free form kind of in this revision. We'll continue to add more functionality around the targets. So yeah, thanks. Great question. Okay, so let's keep moving on just for time's sake. The other one, or nextly, we wanted to go ahead and just talk a little bit about, again, those targets. We talked about kind of the targets. Also, just a kind of job perspective. Jobs within Salt can either be comprised of any sort of like even very simple, module functions that you currently run. You can see here, this is hopefully very, those of you who are using Salt on the command line, just a disk.usage, a command.run, test.ping, file.managed. We can come in and a nice, because my memory's horrible, I can't remember all the commands. So if we do want to come in, maybe it is a file dot, a module function, at least I have everything listed so I can go through and pick from that list. I think next iteration, or again, kind of a future or something that we're working towards is, Charles knows these file options a lot better than I do, maybe a descriptive, sort of, to do kind of this file change group, it'll actually pop up a description of what that is. So now I'll have a little bit more aid or help in actually crafting these jobs, et cetera. But even from, if we want to go ahead, and for those of you who deal primarily with like a state, either orchestration or just a state.apply, we can go ahead and pick those types of jobs as well. Notice that the screen has changed a little bit just in context of a state run. We'll go ahead and supply inline pillar capabilities. This does have to be in JSON format here in this kind of inline pillar. But you can go ahead and supply that as well. One thing that I like to do is that, when we're calling out from the specific state that we want to include, I store everything that I do in Git. So I store very little kind of in the file server of Salt Enterprise, again, just because there's not a lot of version control and some of those sorts of things, and so I want to be able to, kind of craft that or put that in. So again, very easy on the masters in that plugin installment or assignment to go ahead and just specify, the order of priority. I always put Git first, and then I put, the enterprise, file system, and then the local file system is third for me. And so I can have those listed, and it will go ahead and just kind of go through my file servers that I've specified and just add those to the list. And so I won't go in and kind of show that. I think I've already got some jobs that are already kind of calling. You can see some that I've just went in, maybe just for a specific, state run of Nginx, and this is just going to call out to a Git repository and just install that right from there. Or we can come into the file system itself, and you'll see that, here's those, very similar, maybe an SSE branch within this file system. Here's my Apache init state. Again, we do give you some, editing capabilities to kind of craft those states and the jobs. But, again, very similar. We can go ahead and template that in Jinja, just like you do today. Regular package installed and everything. It should be pretty seamless if you're familiar or kind of used to state creation within Salt Open. Once those jobs have been run, and I will go ahead and I wanted to call out just a couple of different types of job execution or runs within the UI itself. So I can go ahead and pick, maybe I am just working with these Ubuntu minions again. I have my 2 minions, in the list. And so there are a couple ways that we can actually execute jobs right from the minions themselves or from these targets. I can come in and just pick a specific job in the list, choose that job, go ahead and execute it. So that would be kind of style number 1. We can also come in from that same jobs list. Maybe I want to come down and actually just perform an ad hoc command. So again, Salt, we want to do the Ubuntu minions. We want to do, maybe it's a network, if I can spell, address. We'll go ahead and execute that job as well. All of those returns, kind of that ad hoc or anything, even from the command line, will go ahead and show up, and I'll get to that when we show the reports. But that all does roll up into the Postgres database, and I'll be able to kind of audit the success and the results of those that job execution. Really, the last 2 ways to execute jobs within the enterprise, one would be just to come into the job list. We were looking at that before. So maybe I needed to execute this network.net stat function. I can go ahead and then just from the job itself, target specific minions. Again, maybe we'll just stick with Ubuntu. We'll run that, and then we'll go ahead and get our job results. So from here, if we want to go ahead and kind of jump from actually executing those jobs to the returns, or the results of that, this is where we can come in and actually see kind of the history for that job or for that group of minions on what jobs have been executed. What you get to see here is that we have kind of return information. So this last one that I just executed still hasn't returned. Well, there you go, I just refreshed the UI. So I can see that 2 minions have returned successful, 0 failed and 0 not returned yet. We can drill into the JID and actually see the results of that returner. There are several kinds of return or returners or custom returners within the UI. This happens to be one of those, like the netstat returner, where we give you, more of a graphical representation of kind of the connections within network. Some of the other ones in the list, you can see those kind of listed here that I utilize a lot. So that disk.usage, for example, we can get in and see something like just a slider. Then I can go ahead and pick my minion, actually see again graphical representation of disk space or usage on that disk. I won't go into all of these, but again, even our command.run, network interfaces, etc. One that I like to bring out, if any of you maybe have sat through our compliance or our auditing capabilities, is to be able to go in and see from an auditing perspective, here's the minions and their current state of compliance against the spec that I've sent against. Right now, a lot of this is very heavy to CIS or custom CVE, but here I can come in and drill in, see all the minions that have failed either a specific CIS check. I know I've got one as well. If I want to choose one specifically, I can choose this like CIS 1011, set password expiration days. Nicety here, a nice option that really has kind of gone over well for a lot of the customers that I work with, is that this ability to take all the minions that have failed a specific audit. And again, my minion count is pretty small just for the demo, but I could select all minions that have failed that 1011 check, come down and pick my specific state that will go ahead and correct that. In this case, it's my 1011 fix. We can go ahead and run that and actually see the results just for that set of targets. We just really convert all those failed minions that have failed that particular check to a list within Salt, and then just target those with that check. So that's a couple of the returns. The last one is maybe just more from a kind of a standard or a static report. And you might look at this and go, oh, there's not a lot of reports in there. And I think really within Salt, and Charles can correct me here, but I think we've more kind of went down the road of kind of custom returners. So those sorts of things that I was showing you before around compliance, disk usage and net stats, we're continuing to augment that list. And so the data that's returned to you within the UI is going to be very beneficial, either visually or just from the data source itself. The report's probably one of the most common ones that I utilize really is this job history report, where I can get in and across my entire enterprise, show me all jobs and their current, or their state, success, fail, not returned. You probably don't want to do this too much, that all-time job history, because that would crunch your Postgres database just a bit. I'm just going to tell you that now. So be cautious as you bring that through. But you can notice as I kind of scroll down the list, you'll see everything from command line interface jobs, to specific state jobs or functions. So everything is stored. I can go in and audit and see the results, even of those, like a test.version that was run out the CLI. I still can drill into that job ID and see, kind of that, at least that very basic results. And if I want to go in and maybe open that up to other, sorts of return data, maybe this is, I can show that, here's the expected, the return, the missing, here's the load data, which tells me kind of the assignment, the function. Again, all that data exists. It's just how you want to go ahead and consume it, and hopefully we're giving that to you. And so that's the reports as well. And I think that was the last one on the list.
Yeah. So just to kind of make the distinction a little bit further too, when you're if you have users that are simply not ever going to use the UI, you're still able to see that data from when the user is utilizing the CLI, just to make sure. I wanted to kind of bolden that one a little bit more. I find a lot of value in that because, as an administrator of my organization, I can have a view into the infrastructure and see even my users or my admins that are doing their jobs using the CLI. We're still auditing that and containing or managing that content. So Salt Open versus Salt Enterprise, really it comes down to these pieces here. From a Salt Open standpoint, there's no user interface. You can build your own if you want. We've had quite a few of you guys do that. Excellent work, thank you. But we're kind of going in a little different direction with our version from an enterprise standpoint, being able to make those aggregate settings and connections to all of your systems within your infrastructure. Then, of course, on the open side with the API, it is a single master connection, whereas on the enterprise side, again, you're able to aggregate all of those masters. A typical user on the open side is a DevOps engineer. I don't see very many beards here right now for some reason. That's kind of awkward. Usually we have like massive big beards, but I can't grow one, so I just don't do it. But obviously on the enterprise side, it's really more geared towards the enterprise function of things and being able to do what you need to do within your infrastructure on a global scale, if you will. From a scalability standpoint, you utilize a single master and your syndics, or multiple masters and your syndics. Whereas on the enterprise side, multi-master and massive scale. No database on the open side, and of course we utilize a Postgres database on the enterprise side because we want to be able to view that historical content. User security on the open side is of course configurable per user, which can become quite tedious over time. Whereas within enterprise, it's native role-based access control, as we just mentioned. And then again, data visualization, auditable job history, and the library itself, and the event aggregation on the open side is a little limited due to the fact that we're able to store all of this content within a database on the enterprise side. It really does provide us with a new view into our infrastructure to be able to do things a little bit differently. And then lastly, I think this is the last one. Salt Open, from a content standpoint, it's the open source formula library, and you guys can write your own things as needed. Whereas on the enterprise side, we're curating that content and making sure that it is things that are specific to being able to do enterprise level tasks. Whereas, obviously you can do the same on the open side. It's just really a larger grouping of those specific types of content. And then, of course, we're packaging and testing everything as much as possible. We're doing millions of tests a day on Salt Open and ensuring that that content is valid and evaluated appropriately. And then all of that feeds into the enterprise, and we take additional care to ensure that that information is able to be utilized effectively within your infrastructure. And then, of course, support.
Oh.
No, that's good. So on the open side, this is kind of our products and services scenario, and it kind of builds iteratively over, if you will. We don't provide support on the open side right now, but if you want some professional services to be able to build a specific task or a specific function, build out something, we do provide that. As well as whenever you get into the enterprise side, this is kind of our subscription services detail here. You have the ability to utilize support across 3 different scenarios. It's a team-based, corporate-based, and enterprise-based, and we'll show that in just a second. And of course, all the wonderful details that we just talked about from an enterprise standpoint is available there. And then this is our technical support scenario. The team-based function, you can see it really basically builds on itself based on whatever you really need within your infrastructure from a support standpoint. I think we probably the next time we make this slide, we're going to make everything super black so we can actually see the text up here. But all of these slides are going to be uploaded into the app, the SaltConf app, so you can have access to this to be able to see this detail further. But being able to do things based off of a specific SLA, and it grows depending on which version of the support that you choose. Thanks.